don't need to record it. And we're live 5 minutes early. We'll give everyone a second to hop in here as the people trickle in. We'll let them trickle in. But yeah, so that control that you're talking about, that was definitely one of the big reasons why so many people, especially myself, were drawn to DD back then. Besides just the loud part, they were just so tight and in control, even on the big walls, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go share this link around just so that people know we're live. See, we got some people coming in already. Share to page Baseaholic. Okay, I will switch to the Baseaholic page. Where's Blake at? Tell him to share this thing. Oh, I can hear myself talking.
He's probably out there somewhere.
Yeah, I can. Hey, we're gonna. Oh, I'm sure. Okay. I heard it was like a feedback loop. I could hear myself talking, and then you replying to my talking. So I was like, "Oh, wait, hold on a second." But yeah, so for everyone just joining, we have with us. I'm gonna hope I pronounce it right. Jassa Langford.
Close enough.
Well, so what is it? What's the proper enunciation?
I like the first A is an E, so Jessa.
Jessa. I thought it wasn't. Oh, okay. Jessa Langford. Got it. For those who don't know, the owner of Digital Designs, founder as well, I believe. Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Founder and owner of Digital Designs Audio, and for a lot of us, especially with us mostly being a bass head viewed show, the first loud system many of us ever heard was DD Audio in some capacity, and it was life-changing for many, many, many of us. I'm going to bring this up real quick just so the people, a lot of people, I've seen this photo before, but this is the first loud DD, first loud build I ever heard. 495 F15s on 4 and then 8 M3s, the original M3s. This is back 14, 15 years ago. In that time, I must have been 16, 17, so around that time frame. And it was 160 dB on AGM batteries, and it sounded fantastic.
Yeah.
That was one thing that we were talking about as we were live, was just the subs have that control, that authority to them. What gives a sub that control generally?
In general, it's an over-damped system, so you want to have a lot of control on the voice coil, so a lot of motor. So typically more motor than you want to see that a program wants to see, like you're doing bass boxes, right?
Yep.
So if you have a speaker that with not such a strong motor presence, it's a lot easier to manipulate the frequency response with some box changes. But when you overmotor it, then the box, it's a less dependent on the box.
Yep.
So
gotcha. As Facebook user said, that was Brett Arsenault.
Yeah.
Yep, that was the first loud thing I ever heard all those years ago. He's taught me how to get all about getting loud, and that a vehicle can be that loud and still sound great.
Yeah, and hit hard. Yeah.
Yeah. That thing, to this day, if it was still built as it was, would still be one of the most impressive. We talk about it pretty every now and then, that if he had built that today, it would have been a mid-60 all day, with how affordable power has gotten and how much we've learned about enclosures since then.
Yeah.
And then, as you mentioned, these the subs, the programs, you put in these modern high performance subs, these programs kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
They're like, whoa, hold on a second, this isn't right. And then you type in how much power you're using, and the program's just like, sir, that's not possible.
Yeah. kind of figured out pretty early that for us anyway, our background or my background was more in pro audio and studio work, and the car audio seemed a lot closer to that than home audio. But a lot of the programs everybody are using are home audio programs, and they're not they're looking for cues that are a lot easier to manipulate the box response with. But in this environment, the car audio environment, the amplifier power just took off so crazy that that's what dictates the response curve. So you're really controlling amplifier power. The whole system is designed around controlling, because an amplifier, you got 10,000 watts of power on something, it has no choice.
Speakers just do what they're told. That was one thing Adam Young from MST. That's one thing he told me, that speakers are dumb, man. They just do what you tell them to do.
Yeah,
that's it. And then that was as power was getting cheaper and cheaper. It just got to the point where obviously the enclosure always matters, building a strong, solid enclosure. But you just throw enough power at something, something's going to happen.
Something's going to happen. You just got to control it, and there's a bandwidth, a power bandwidth, we used to call it. So when you're designing a speaker, you need to know how much power it's going to see over the long term, and that dictates how you design the driver. If you want it to sound good on that amount of power, then you have to tune it to the power.
Yep. It makes perfect sense. Oh. Fine dining. What percentage of GD products come from China? Well, obviously, some products are always going to come. Some things always have to come from China. They're just some stuff you just cannot get made in the USA. That's just a fact.
Yeah, we lost magnet manufacturing in the early 2000s.
In the US?
Yeah, in the US.
I remember. I've been friends with Jacob Fuller over at Sundown for a very long time, and there was one point where he tried to even source U.S. made baskets for his new tooled baskets, and he went through the whole process of doing it. It was gonna be like triple the cost, and he's like, you know what, we're gonna do it anyway. And then the U.S. manufacturer was like, nope, never mind, we don't want to do it. Fine, so 100%, no sir. I know for that for a fact.
Yeah, we've had to source parts globally for quite a while.
Yeah, so. I mean, everyone has to. Fine Dining says 100%. Yeah,
the original.
Get out of here.
Yeah, the original beast frames that we did were made in the U.S. That was a sand casting. To get pressure casting is a whole different thing. So frames have been offshore for a while,
and it's one thing that has to be. I mean, especially if you want to keep it reasonably, as my buddy here says. If you want to keep it reasonably priced for production, some things just have to come from a larger facility. But from what Blake was saying, y'all spiders are made in the U.S., aren't they?
Yeah, all of our soft parts come. The manufacturers that are left here, and they've consolidated to just a few now. But they're the best cones, the best spider materials, the surround materials. We can't duplicate that stuff in China. We can get reasonably close, and you can get close to the same stiffness, but the weight is quite a bit higher. So the technology of those U.S. manufacturers is really good.
Jim says a pressure mold for an 18-inch basket here will probably cost you $100,000 plus.
Yeah.
And
when you got to have a family of baskets, and then you
through 18, so you're looking at $50,000, $500,000, $600,000, and just in the first round of molds, and you hope you get it right.
If you can find somebody that wants to do it. So.
And that was Sundown's issue. He went through the whole process, got a quote, got all kinds of stuff. He's like, let's do it. Manufacturer went, we're not interested. Thank you, though.
Yeah.
What do you mean you're not interested?
Yeah. And then there's certain price points that you don't really have an option to do it here.
But
we pay on some of our bigger cones, 15s and 18s. We pay more for that cone than importing an entire 12-inch, subwoofer.
Yep. Yeah. I firmly believe it.
Yeah.
All carbon fiber made in house. Now that is cool. And this is what the U.S. made argument is so I don't like it. I used to be all about, oh, it's got to be made in the U.S. until as I was explaining back when I thought I knew everything. But as you learn about manufacturing and how things work, you're like, oh, well, it wouldn't, a 100% U.S. made 9918 would be quadruple the cost, maybe more, if even possible.
It's not possible.
Yeah, if even possible, because I think the magnets would be you just couldn't do it.
Right. The last large magnet manufacturer was in Dallas, and they said it's been 25 years since they were bought out and all the tooling was shipped off. So your magnets now, you're going to have to get them from Brazil, or you got to get them from China. So there's no option.
And China can make some really great stuff as long as you hold their hands to do it.
Yeah.
But so the iron claw spiders and all the soft parts made in the U.S., those spiders are, I think they're great. They're so, as Blake was telling us, they're so stiff when they're new that you have to pre-break them in with a hydraulic press, basically.
Yeah, we break them in so that your amplifier has a shot at breaking them in the rest of the way. But something that we've always done, I mean, we've got speakers out there that are still playing from the 90s.
I believe it.
We want speakers to last a long time. So it isn't just about taking it out of the box and having it play optimally. Because if you do that, a couple months down the road, you got a sloppy speaker. So
that's one thing a lot of people don't realize is they're like, oh, these subs are so stiff, they're too stiff. But yeah, they have to be, to an extent, overly stiff when you're brand new. So 10 years from now, you can still have some control over the sub.
Especially if you're looking at a speaker to take 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 watts of power for its entire lifetime, it has to be built that way.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the new Solo X's from Kicker, the L7X. They are incredibly stiff when they're new. I mean, they're like bricks. We did 6 of them in this wagon, and they're like pushing on this table at first.
Yeah.
But they have that control, that authority of they sound like they have control over the sub, and you can really hear when a manufacturer is developing proper subwoofers. That was one thing we were talking about a little bit, before we went live, is the authority of the DD subs. Oh, let's see, we got Steve coming in. TS parameters change over time. So yeah, I mean, TS parameters will change over time. TS parameters can change same sub based on location. You could change the location of your driver from one side of the state to the other, and the TS parameters are gonna measure differently.
Yeah.
Jim, Steve is apparently having internet issues. You'll have that. Bobby said he was feeling unwell, so he was taking the night off. How often do you guys do runs of Z subs?
Z subs is usually 2 to 4 times a year. It's starting to pick up more. So last year we did them more often. This year we're taking another look at it and probably do larger runs.
Yeah, the Z's are, I mean, some of the most awesome, still some of the loudest subs ever created. That's one thing. DD over the last year y'all haven't had a ton of product. You've been making some changes. You've been ramping up on production of some other things. So people over a year seem to have forgotten that DD makes some of the loudest stuff on the planet, and you have for a long time. Let's see if I can pull up one of these. So I've never had a big Z myself. I've always wanted one. I'm gonna get one day, but I did have the baby Z.
Yeah, that's a nice speaker right there.
I got this thing for an absolute steal, brand new, $400. You couldn't tell me I wasn't awesome. We ended up doing this 118 in the back of a PT Cruiser, 154, 155 dB. It was fantastic.
Yeah, and that's 15 years old or so right there?
Yep. That was 14, 15 years ago. Hi.
Yep.
Oh, hey. Oh, hey.
Is that what you wanted?
I mean, and to let Max in the room because he was crying.
No.
Thank you.
I took him for a walk.
Oh, then who was it? Who was scratching at the door?
I mean, I guess.
Oh, okay. What is the history of the Z? Did you have military contract to develop the motor? I've never heard that rumor before.
No, there was no military contract to develop the motor. But
are y'all slinging voice coils at the enemy?
Yeah. We were, and part of the 99 development was just how to get the motor stronger. So, and we built some ferrite motors that were up in the 170 pounds and things. So just trying to get as much flux in the gap. So then we started using Neo configurations, and eventually that's where the 99 and the Z's became different products. So we were able to get a lot higher flux density in the Z type structure than we could get out of any kind of ferrite structure or any other kind of Neo structure. We can machine anything we want. So we tried all sorts of topologies. So.
Oh, I'm sure of it. I mean,
yeah.
I remember like the radial design was in for a little bit. There was a couple different companies trying a couple different layouts, and we've only seen one come out with a Neo motor that was really good, and it had the same basic layout. It's the Sundown Compact Neo is just shorter, but it's the same basic layout. Yeah, and then we've seen other companies try to copy your motor structure, like Chinese companies mainly, like American Base has a version. There's a couple different other Chinesium versions who just don't quite have the quality.
Yeah, they've been copied just about everywhere. So,
what's up, Steve?
Hey, man.
What's up, guys? Sorry I'm late.
No, dude, you got a lot going on this week.
Yeah, but this was like the biggest fire you could imagine happening.
What happened?
When you were putting a show on. So, I try to keep it short, but the guy I was dealing with was let go about a month ago.
Uh-oh.
And my emails have not really been returned, and I finally got a call back. Was it this morning? Could have been this morning. And or I got maybe it was yesterday. So I got a call, talk to the lady, and everything's good. Okay, we're all set, blah, blah, blah. So go into today thinking everything's good, doing show stuff. And then she just called me like literally 40 minutes ago. I was like, well, we have an issue. You don't have
You're like,
this.
Nope, call back next week. Let me know about the issue.
It's like, you don't have this, you don't have this, you have this, and this is all stuff the other guy should have told you, and it's on us. So go ahead and submit your special events permit, submit this, and this, pay for this extra insurance. I don't know how much that's going to cost. And then they're going to make it. It's going to happen no matter what. But next year, things will be done correctly.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they do anything but just make it happen no matter what, that's all on them, because like this dude, he is obviously let go for a reason.
Dude, I mean, I was like, I got people coming not only from the other side of the country, but from Mexico and Canada.
All over the world.
Like, this is a huge show for us, and there's a lot of people coming, and you've got like 100 rooms booked. So you're gonna have a bunch of people showing up, regardless if you say we can or can't. We're coming.
Yep, basically. That's crazy. Well, I mean, I'm glad they said it's gonna happen, so that's good.
Yeah, I have to call the insurance company tomorrow, make sure I can add the stuff I need to add. Then I need to submit that along with the lot layout and my special events permit. And then the lady from the hotel is going to go down to the special events office. She knows people down there, I guess.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
She's going to fast track it through and just get it done.
So you need to make a post on like the show page. Like, look, guys, we need to be on our extra good behavior this weekend. No shenanigans.
Well, do you know what the Mint 400 is? You guys know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Off-road race, yeah.
It's a big off-road race, and it starts at Buffalo Bills. And the race starts on March 4th, but setup starts Friday.
This Friday.
They're going to be there alongside us, kind of setting
that's
up.
Kind of cool.
400. So that it's cool, but she said what that means is there's going to be a lot of eyes out there that normally wouldn't be out there. as far as like people that work for the county, so all the shit needs to be buttoned up and hopefully, yeah.
Gotta love it.
Everybody be nice to each other. No fighting. Nobody wreck their car into somebody else's car and nobody get hurt. That's
Nobody get hurt. It's Stephen Duncan bringing the wildest build anyone's ever seen, about to float a child in the door. Nobody get hurt though.
So yeah, that's how my last hour went.
Oh well, I mean, I'm glad it got sorted. It's getting sorted.
Yeah. So, okay, back to this. What?
Yeah.
So
we were
a little bit, but
we were just going back and forth between comments and just kind of
around here
talking about DD.
Yeah.
And then Blake's in the comments. Oh, speaking of the show, I bet Blake is excited it's going to happen because he's hyped to go.
Yeah, he got his ticket punched today or yesterday.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Any plans to develop or release another Neo woofer?
Oh, yeah.
I would like to see the 95Z come back just because I know I could afford it.
Yeah, there's other Neo motors in the works and on mid ranges, woofers, subwoofers, scaling some stuff down just to get the weight off of drivers for people that don't want to add, hundreds and hundreds of pounds to get the system done. So yeah, that's in the works.
These things are too cheap. Within 30 seconds of me turning these on, I called Jack and said, "How much are these?" Double the price, and we need to tell the world about them.
Yeah, they normally would be. That was kind of a special circumstance, and we have a whole line of new stuff we've been working on for about the last year and a half. So we just wanted to get ready.
Yep, it was. If these are any indication as to what's to come, I think a lot of people are going to be. Excuse me, a lot of SQ people are going to be making a big transition because these are fantastic.
Yeah, and so those were they were the first iteration of the product, and a lot of developments happened since then of
that's crazy
where it's going. So it's fun. It's going to be really good.
I think I still have the box in here. Maybe. Yep. So I have access, and I have some of like the Goldilocks tweeters and mid ranges. Like these are the ScanSpeak 2904s.
Yeah.
I have C7s. I have some of the best stuff that people say you can get, and the scans are not on my desk for a reason, but DDs are on my desk. That's how good these are.
Yeah, ScanSpeak makes really great products. So
yeah, like those tweets were sent to me by Jeffrey Hall as a here, try these, and they'll be going in my truck and they sound fantastic. But I have it set in the truck currently, but after hearing these, I was like, oh, buddy.
Yeah, even going back to the old Revelators and stuff, ScanSpeak's done great work.
Steven, this is actually a question that I asked Jack, I think maybe a week or two ago, if DD planned to make a dedicated 8-inch mid bass.
We have some the new W8C is like a mid bass driver.
Oh, I gotta find that. I need to find that video. I think it was on the DD page. Someone posted a video of Jack will know where it is. He'll be able to tell me of a DD mid bass, like the pro audio style mid bass.
Yeah, it's a 10.
With at least 2.5 inches of excursion. This thing was absolutely stroking on this desk.
There's a family of those coming out. That's the first driver in the family was that 10. That's kind of big for a door. You got to be a dedicated system to put that in the door, and we got some people doing that. In fact, the Fiat you guys will listen to this weekend, I think it's going to have 2 of those in each door. But for a driver that fits easier, the W10C's got a half roll surround, a longer coil, and more excursion, and it does mid bass, really well. So then that opens up to where we'll have, mid bass to mid range bandwidth drivers coming, rather than one the W8 worked really well for a while, but it was a mid bass and mid range. Everything's specialized a little bit more, and people are throwing even more power, even at the motorcycle market. So one driver covering that bandwidth isn't really doing the job anymore. So we've had to split it into two different jobs.
The whole motorcycle market and like the off-road market as a whole the motorcycle market is growing down here where I'm at. It's not nearly as big as it is in like the Carolinas and other places. Some of the stuff I see on these bikes is like, especially out in like Steve's Way and on the West Coast, some of those bikes are just mind-blowing. It's so loud.
Yeah. That's good that you guys are going that direction, because the more people that are running active, the better.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing I've noticed over the last couple of weeks is specifically probably 2 months, people, basehead specifically, have been talking about DSP and running active and separating frequencies more properly than I've ever seen before. And it makes me very excited to be able to listen to some of these big builds like stunt walls and things like that, knowing they'll finally be working towards sounding better.
Because people were afraid of DSP, especially in the installer market for a while, but the way the motorcycle guys took to it, and like you said, the stunt walls and the outside systems are using them to do really good tuning. Yep. I think everybody's learning that it's not as daunting as it looks, and if you put a little bit of time in there, the results are amazing.
I mean, I definitely understand where a lot of the guys would be like, man, it's a lot, because if you're going from never having a DSP, you're going to be told run active, so get rid of crossovers, run a channel per speaker. You're going to be told to do a lot of stuff to do it the right way, and that's a lot to someone who's never done it. That's a huge jump.
Yeah,
but you don't have to run active. You don't have to do all that to get into a DSP. You can run your normal passive setup you've been running and just plug in. Plug the DSP in line and start learning how the EQ works and learning how everything functions. So I definitely understand where they were thinking. It's a lot.
It's almost like if a company would do, and I don't know if they already do this, but if you had
Brett,
a basic operating system for your DSP, and then you had an advanced one. So for people that have no clue what they're doing, and makes it something that'll be easy for them to jump in. Have a few different adjustments for each thing until they're ready to move on to the next thing. Because when you do open those screens up and you've got 40 boxes staring at you in the face, and there's a bunch of little numbers and dots, it's like, I don't want to push the wrong button here, so I'm not going to do anything.
No, I mean, especially with like yours, for example. I mean, you have a 12-channel DSP. It is a wall of options when you open it.
Yeah.
So all of them are, and that's a software hurdle that we're looking at, and I know some other people are looking at to have some entry screens where you can just pick some things and it does a little bit for you.
Yep.
And without it trying to tune for you, but just intuitively guide you through a little easier.
Yeah. So JL has something like that. They have the setup tool, but you can even take it a step further. I see what Steve's saying, where like if you select I'm running passive, I'm not running active, then it'll just take away the crossover options. So you won't even let you mess with them at that point. Like, nope, you're going to run passive, no crossover options for you. We're going to preset your subwoofer at 80 hertz low pass, 24 dB. Don't touch it. Here's your EQ per speaker. Here's some time. Play with that. That way you take away a lot of the danger. So it's a good idea, Steve.
Yeah.
But the problem is you got to have a software team to build that stuff, to do it the right way.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot going on in the background, even though it's an easy button for us. There's still all that stuff that the DSP needs to be told what to do.
2878. Are you talking about the tweak is too much, or talking about the way we've been doing things, running amps as DSPs? When is the next DSP going to be available?
I think you were going to say something about the software.
Yeah. You have to get the complete software going, and then the second layer is to take that complexity and reduce it into the simplicity. And but you got to have the back end done first before you can do that front interface.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a lot of people in the base set world specifically are used to companies coming in, slapping a logo on a product out the door. They think a lot of people have the misconception where like these things are developed super fast. But when you're doing things ground up, like DD does a lot of their products fully ground up, stuff takes time.
Yeah, so like one of the questions is when's the next DSP coming? It'll be this summer. So we're in the software phase right now of that DSP. The hardware's where we like it, and now it's writing software and trying to balance those lines between what's easy functionality for somebody just starting out, and then what's functionality for someone who's already in the deep dive.
Yep, and it's hard to balance the two because if you make it too simple, you take away too much control. Someone like me or Jeffrey Hall or some of these advanced tuners are gonna be like, well, there's not enough control. Like this isn't gonna work. Like I can't do this, I can't do that. But if you just toss them in the deep end, like with a Helix Brax DSP software, it's just like, whoa, man, this is a lot. I mean, some of those softwares, even for me, I've been tuning I've been using DSP since 360.3 Rockford, long time ago. I open up the Brax software, the Helix software. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. Give me a second.
Yeah, especially with today's cars, and you have to fix some things first, So
yeah, modern cars, you have to fix the signal coming in before you can even start tuning with it. Gotta love it. Let's see. Let's share screen. I have a video of this mid bass driver that I want to show. There we go. Y'all should be able to hear it. Let me turn the audio down a little bit. Okay. Nice. Whoa, look at that.
You're going to have to put an enclosure in your door. At least to get everything out of it. It looks like a little subwoofer. I mean, look at the basket. It's cool basket.
So this is Loud Fiat, I believe, and I think he's
got 210s in his doors. I think I saw the other day.
Yeah.
This is a video from, I guess, today or the other day or something.
Yeah, I think we saw this one today.
Play. Why you no play? There it is. So this is just the mid basses.
Yeah, I can't wait to see this car because he's got all that power. That's awesome.
My
first systems didn't have that much flex, like subs and all.
And someone said these doors are like 150 pounds too, and they're shaking.
The guy seems like he's not playing around about the system. It seems like he's doing everything the best that he could do it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this thing.
Dude, 400 volts? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, scary.
These 10s only need about 500 to 1,000 watts of power max, though. They're real efficient. They play well.
100. I remember when whole subwoofer systems didn't have 500 watts.
Yeah, that's true.
Are they in an enclosure? The door is probably acting as an enclosure based on the flex that I was seeing. So most like mid basses and stuff like that, they're designed to work fairly infinite baffly or large leaky boxes as the door.
This driver, normally you're only going to try to play down to 80 maybe, but this one can actually play down to about 50.
So playing that low, like how high would you recommend people kind of cut that off at?
The response is pretty good on that one up, past 2K. So it's pretty versatile.
That's solid.
It starts to roll off at around 2K, but it's still nice out to, between 4,000 and 5,000. So we've got some applications where people just putting a bullet tweeter in that in a little 1 cubic foot box, and it just hammers.
Dub Team in that application, they are running, from what I can tell, as dedicated mid bass, probably 60 to 50, probably to 500, probably no higher than that. And then he has dedicated mid ranges that take over.
So that woofer there is not a technically a mid range. It's really a mid woofer and up.
Yeah. So there's a weird we're still working on it in the bass head world. Like people call it mid bass, they'll call it mid range a mid bass, and
It's
they'll
hard
run
to
a mid
figure out what
range.
to call this stuff right now. Yeah.
They'll run a mid bass and a mid range in the same door, running only about 40 hertz of difference between the two crossover points. And it's like, man, you could probably just eliminate one of those to be real and save yourself some headache.
Or just tune them properly and then sound better.
40 to 500
is
what he's running those. Dude, those things were absolutely getting it. I mean, what amps you running it on? I'm sure it's some 400 volt monster. Like that's
I think his mid bass amps were smaller ones. I think.
So probably only like 20K.
No, I think like normal amps, and then just the Stetsons in the back or whatever are the.
Bro,
100 volt.
I've never in my life seen something like that. I remember the first time I saw him start posting about it. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's very interesting. I'm like, I had a negative connotation of high voltage from someone who did it a couple years ago, and I wasn't a fan of theirs personally, and it was very not great. So I'm like, I don't know about this high voltage stuff, but I went in thinking, okay, I have a negative connotation of this. I need to ignore that and focus on this, like what he's doing. Like, how is he doing it? And I mean, dude's doing it. 1,000 watts per mid bass is what Blake says.
When they're playing giant systems like they do in Brazil, as I spent 6-8 years in Brazil, when you don't have to do a power supply and it's just all amplifier, then you've saved a big portion of the cost. So we saw people down there taking copper bars with wires hooked to them and throwing them up onto power lines and powering their systems in their vehicles this way.
What? Are you serious?
That
oh my
God. Like, you just want to say, bro, there's no way. But I've seen such craziness. Like, I've spent a good bit of time in like East Africa and Northern Africa, and I've seen that they'll do it.
That's why it was 240 volt amps, because that's what they were running. They were just driving it off of
Let's run through. So we got fine dining. No mid bass driver handles 1,000 watts. Fine, but you're right, bro. Nothing's gonna deal with that. But having 1,000 watts on tap is totally different than using 1,000 watts constantly.
Yeah, there's an impedance curve that's being driven there, man.
Yeah, but it's mid range specifically. It is not from like one 1 ohm to 4 ohm. It's like 4 ohm to 60 ohm. It's very sharp. And then what does Jessa think about less drivers in a setup versus more speakers?
Depends on what setup you're trying to do.
The fewer speakers, the less comb filtering. So
like bigger speakers with less versus more smaller. Is that what you mean?
So I'm gonna jump ahead. I'm gonna try to answer based upon DD being one of the first companies to come out with a 12-inch and 15-inch mid-range. I'm gonna lean towards they probably think less speakers is more.
Well, yeah. Again, it depends on where you're fitting the stuff. If you're limited in space, then that's how you want to do it. I'd use a bigger driver over multiple small drivers. But when you're building these big outside systems, and if you're not limited by space, it just depends on what setup you're trying to do. Yeah.
What I don't know if I missed. Did you go over any of your background or anything?
Actually, no, we didn't. That's actually we went. Well, we were on like video together for like 20 minutes before we went live, so we were already deep into like speaker talk.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I asked that because I know when I took my tour of DD a few years ago, and I don't know if it was in the attic or where exactly it was, but
I'm still here.
There's some,
I'm back.
Big box speakers that were like hanging in a auditorium or something, and I can't remember who was giving me. I think Aaron at the time was still with you guys, and he was kind of giving me the tour and talking to me about how you guys have done a lot of that over the years.
Yeah, I think those were some nightclub speakers that.
Right.
Yeah.
So for you guys to have like 15-inch mid bass, it's probably nothing new to you.
Right.
It might be new to us bass heads, but I think you guys have probably been doing that in these big box speakers with, big sub drivers as well, but, for probably a long time.
Yeah, so in the late 80s when we started, it was more pro audio and studio applications. So that's the type of drivers that we were using. And then also some high-end audio.
Yep. So I guess I'll go ahead and ask, and Drew could just join in when he gets back. Like, how did you get started in car audio, or did it come from just audio in general and then transition into car audio?
Yeah, I guess audio in general, and I like cars. I like music. I was working in a place in California, and I would be the one people would just ask about what they should buy. And I knew some places to buy some stuff wholesale from a guy that I'd met years ago that had a high-end audio company. So I started just getting deals for people, so they'd buy the right stuff and get it at a good deal. And in doing that, this was in San Diego and Los Angeles. There wasn't a lot available in the late 80s. So I went and ended up designing like a component set because I knew where to get the parts and things and a crossover. So started selling that to some of the local shops to make it easy for them to install stuff because they didn't know how to do crossovers and things. So, and that grew around Southern California. Then a lot of the shops, that bass was really starting to get to be a thing, and there wasn't a whole lot of subs available. So they needed some stuff that would be more durable. So I got a hold of some OEM suppliers back in the day and had them, can you use bigger voice codes? Can you put the motor that you normally put on that 15, can you put it on this 10 over here? So we had to modify some cones. They could, the spiders fit the basket, but they didn't make, like you couldn't get a 10 with a 2.5-inch voice coil then. So they had to modify cones to do it. So started selling those around Southern California. Then, those companies that made those things, once they got the parts figured out, let their bigger customers, hey, we can build this now. So people started doing in a lot higher volume than, someone who's just buying stuff and selling stuff like I was. At the same time, there was some sales reps from the pro audio world had listened to bought some of those speakers in their cars and got a hold of someone and said, these actually sound as good or better than the studio stuff that we're using, So we got a call and said, can you make these into box speakers? I said, sure, we could do that. Yeah. So started building these, and those started going around to stores and studios. And
were you building these like yourself by hand or team of people? How were you doing that?
No, it was just me.
Wow.
So there was a box makers in LA. So, I had someone build the enclosure and made the crossovers and started building those. And, there was no internet then. So to really get into being a brand, you had to have a lot of resources. You had to have advertising, you had to do this, you had to do that. And there was just bigger companies that could do that. And on the studio side, if the speaker worked really well and the engineers could hear a little bit better, they didn't really care what brand was on it. So that path allowed us to grow without being funded or, somebody else, being bought by somebody. Right. So that was probably 87, 86. We just spent most of our development was all in the studio side of stuff.
But you start in the studio, you learn, well, you already knew obviously what sounds good, how to make it sound good, and then how to get the output you want while sounding good. That's the biggest thing.
A lot of what DD products are today came from those years, because in a studio, in a busy studio, they're running 24/7. So as soon as someone's done, the room's booked for somebody else. So the speakers never stop playing. And one of their issues back then was finding something durable enough that could take all that abuse all day and just keep working. They didn't have to change stuff out. So that's where we started learning about spider durability and surrounds and overdamp
making it play for months at a time without degradation. And
so, like, some people had these questions about teal smalls, and that's where we started to learn. You design a driver, and if it has really nice teal small parameters, it's pretty easy to manipulate with a box. But those drivers don't take power all that well, and they tend to fatigue pretty quickly, and then you just got to start changing them out. And we found it, you can go stiffer, the Q changes, but the end result of the box response stays pretty much the same. But when you really throw power on it, the power bandwidth expands. So the cone doesn't just sit there and flutter, when you get to a certain power point, because everybody's seen that in their systems. You get to a certain power and it just starts flapping. And that's when you've lost control of the moving mass.
And now that you mention that, I haven't, when power first started getting cheaper, I say cheaper, like I went from a single M4A to a pair of D9s, and I ran on a single sub just playing around one day.
Yeah.
And it's not that the sub was unloading, because I was well within where it would play, but you just start adding power. It just starts to flutter, starts to completely lose control of itself, even though you're within the floating range of the enclosure. Yeah, that is. I never.
Do you still have a set of those first studio box speakers that you made by chance?
Yeah, we have quite a few of them around. In fact,
really,
that's one right there. So
really, that's one from back in the 80s.
Dude, how cool is that?
Yeah, that's probably 30 years old.
Oh, dude, I love that. That is so cool.
I stopped by there sometime last year. I didn't spend enough time there. I was very quick. Just went in, got a quick tour, left. Man, they got a bunch of they've kept a bunch of the old stuff, and it was real cool to see a bunch of the old stuff. It's really cool to see companies keep that old stuff on hand.
Yeah. Yeah, the 9500 design came from a studio monitor sub originally that started in the 80s.
Good Lord, that studio was rocking.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't as big. It wasn't that then, because the amplifiers weren't even that big then. But the guys in the studio wanted to hear when something's wrong with the mix.
Yeah, you have to. It has to be accurate. It
doesn't sound good, but yeah, we need to know when something's wrong. We've EQ'd it wrong, or this is wrong. So I started researching what's the most efficient motor design. What's the, how can we get the most control on this? So started building these underhung drivers, really light moving mass. So the BL product was good, but most of it was from the B side, not the L side. So, if you can keep L down, inductance and everything else is down. So these are really light, real reactive drivers. And so we built these in the studio subs.
So could you, in simple terms, explain to those watching what B and L are, just very surface level, just to help people understand?
Yes. BL product is B, which is in, that's your flux in Tesla. And then L is how much wire is in the gap in meters. So there's your TM.
So B would be, for those watching, I'm sure you've seen Jacob Fuller and others post like the magnetic, what's the word? Not renderings. The
flux density in the gap.
Flux density graphs for the motors. That would be B, right? Like where the magnetic strength is in the motor.
Yeah.
And then L would be the coil itself. How much coil is inside that flux? That motor.
It's not just your peak flux that you get from a meter, but it's also the area of the gap. So you multiply that total area, because that's the length of wire that's in that area.
So, and it's I've noticed Jacob touch on it a little bit, that you can have a very high BL, a very high motor force, but it not be as strong as it is appearing to be, because it's a very narrow narrow margin of where it makes that power. If I'm wording that correctly, and I may not be.
Yeah, especially if you're using the coil to get it up there. So you got a lot of windings. So,
which a lot of these companies, the ones specifically just kind of picking a woofer off of out of a catalog, they're using large dense coils to do that.
Yeah, so X-Max, everybody wants to look at X-Max too. That X-Max is not how a speaker's going to sound, but
and then I see it all the time.
Subwoofers really sound the same, when they're playing in their bandwidth, their power band. If they're not in distress, then all subs are going to make that fundamental pretty well.
Yep, that was
the difference of how they sound is when they're no longer able to play distortion free. So.
That's the biggest thing is especially the way we play things, they're going to end up in distortion of basically immediately within reason. And we're not saying distortion as in like clipping or anything like that. I've struggled to explain this to people because I don't quite understand it well enough to explain it simply. So I don't understand it well enough, in my belief. But subs moving will just cause distortion to an extent once they get moving too far, once they get in distress, as you put it. And that's where the sound of a sub comes from, would be, I guess, the distortion of, I guess, how that distortion sounds, maybe.
Yeah, because in general, the more a speaker has to move, the worse it is. There's a lot of distortions that happen that, you have frequency modulation distortion. So the fact that it's playing a frequency here and a frequency here, well, this frequency affects this frequency. So it modulates the frequencies. So if you want to reduce all of it, and which is why you have horn-loaded speakers, and you have real good impedance match from the driver to the air, so the efficiency, the transfer is really good, and you have very little cone movement, and that's what you want. The more the cone moves, the more the voice core has to move in the gap, the worse it gets.
Which is why you see
throw sound quality drivers. So
there's very few that can move more than a little bit with zero distortion.
Yeah, and even if it can move a lot, all of those distortions rise with excursion, so it just gets worse and worse. So
DD was one of the first companies that I remember saying that, like all of our subs are going to sound the same. They're just going to keep getting louder and louder as you go.
Yeah, we never really built the good, better, best. We just tried to design them for the power that you were going to actually drive it with.
Yep. I remember reading that it was the boxes originally said. Adam Young and MST told me you could build a box for 2512 and just go 25, 35, 35, 95, and it would just sound wouldn't change. It would just keep getting louder.
Yeah. And if
he proved it.
Yeah, if you didn't need to play the power on the 35 or 95, a 1500 is more than what most people needed. So
yep,
great.
So getting back to where you were going with the first sub, I guess, that you designed, because you said that the guys in the studio wanted more bass, and is that kind of where you're going? You said you took design from another subwoofer and basically made it better, or
from the first one
that get off track.
So the sub we designed for studio was trying to get an exact, it was a nice fast for a subwoofer, if you will, fast driver. When the car audio thing started to come around, we just used that as the basis for like what a 95 ended up becoming.
So where was the transition from going from studios into cars? I mean, was it just something that you kind of wanted to do, is like your own hobby, and then it?
So no, in the 90s there was a global recession happening, so things were moving down business. In order to build better studio monitors, needed to have control over the drivers rather than just having OEM people build it. So the first thing we started doing was just building our little mids, our mid woofers. And we did that for years. And now we could control all the elements of what went into that driver, from voice coil, the cone materials, everything, to, tweak it out. All during that time, there wasn't that many OEM or anybody building in the US. There was, maybe a dozen people. So we were buying parts from vendors. People are calling us parts vendors all the time, like, well, who can we get to build speakers? And they would say, well, we sell parts to these guys. And so we would get calls for years, and we just never pursued building for anybody else because, we had everything we could do just doing what we were doing. When that business tailed down, then it kind of made sense. Well, let's just build private label for people.
That's actually a question that Brett had.
Yeah.
Did you ever OEM for mats?
I'm not going to say who we OEM for, but
yeah, Brett. Asking Brett.
A lot of those things are already known out there, but there's
Were you guys always Digital Designs, or was that not the first name, or was it always DD?
Yeah, Digital Designs was the name
we came up
with. Yeah, originally, and then the motto thing was like always true to the source, because we were trying to make a speaker that if you wanted it to have, a smiley sound, it's better if you do that with your own EQ. I just want to give you what comes in is what comes out. So that's always been our goal.
That's one thing I've always been told is the best speakers, the best amps, they're all transparent. They don't have a sound. They are just
what speakers are is a cumulative distortion machine. So starting from the motor to the voice coil to the cone, every time you add something, it's not perfect. So you do change stuff. And so nothing is perfect. But over time, you can go through and refine all those things. So, cones need to be infinitely rigid and massless. So those are two pretty hard targets to hit simultaneously, right? So you're always looking to increase this or increase that. You're always looking to try to make the suspension better, this better. Every time you do make something like that better, you are able to reduce what you've distorted in the first place. So the goal is always trying to get back to true to the source and just make everything better incrementally.
And it's so rare to hear a system that is very, very much, as little distortion as possible. So many systems are very distortion heavy and it's not that it's, not audible distortion. It's not clipping. It's not anything like that. It's just the sound being changed from the source is distortion.
Yeah.
And the first, I shout out Jeffrey a lot on here, but his car is one of the best ones I've ever heard. That's just how it is. His car is probably one of the most distortion-free, just clean systems that you don't hear the speakers. You don't hear the W7s going in the back because there's no flex, there's no rattle. You don't hear them. You feel the impact. That's it. You don't hear the mid basses. You don't hear the mid ranges. You just a sense of a singer on the dashboard and presence around you. It's just like hearing that first GD system was all those years ago. Hearing something that good is like life changing. It's like, whoa, that's what it can be. Which is what has led me down to learning more about reproduction and making things sound better. Like you start in the studios and you learn what sounds good. And the goal is to keep it sounding good and just make it louder.
Yeah, and we got good feedback on all those years from, all those engineers too. So, and that helped us to figure out how to get, to a better place.
Yep. So you're getting all these calls to OEM stuff for people, the white label. And so that's growing. You're doing that. And then what's next? Where do you go from there?
What's next is we started seeing a big shift in the market. when we first were building these drivers, we could get most everything from the US. Baskets, magnets, back plates, top plates, spiders, cones. We got some cones from Europe. Kurt Mueller made some really nice cones and things too. There were factories in Taiwan that made some good stuff. In Japan, really good factories in Japan. Then we started seeing a lot of parts showing up from China, and the price was just so crazy low that, a lot of people started moving over to those parts. So, this was probably mid 90s. You started feeling the impact of all these imported parts, and knowing that they're not going to be satisfied just selling parts. This is just phase one. So being an OEM manufacturer in the US,
you saw the right.
There's no way, 10 years from now that we can do this. So that kind of set the stage to figure out, what are we going to do now? We were building drivers for a lot of car audio companies too. And, they would call, they just wanted stuff cheaper. And they said, well, do you want it better? So, because from the studio stuff and all the drivers, I knew how to make stuff more durable. And they go, no, people are going to break it anyway, so we just need it cheap. And we want to buy low, sell high, so that we can replace drivers. And that's kind of why the car audio industry got so used to, didn't matter what the customer did, they just changed the speaker back in the day. And we're still struggling with a little bit of that's left, not as bad, but everybody, wants to just have it replaced. I can't think of any other industry where something like that takes place, especially these guys are car guys. You can't shell your engine and think, hey, just give me another engine, so, yeah. But that's how the industry was set up. So, what kind of got us jumped into the car audio thing, there was a show here locally.
In Oklahoma or LA?
Yeah, it was like a USAC or some kind of show in Oklahoma, in Oklahoma City. And we had already by then moved in 92. We moved from California to Oklahoma. And that was largely because of the studio business. We couldn't get our cabinets and stuff built in California. The EPA laws changed and the furniture industry just caved because you had to have recirculating systems and recovery systems, and little shops they couldn't do that. So Oklahoma City, we found, had
California laws limiting businesses? Never. Right. No way.
And that was 30 years. 30 years ago.
I'll tell you though, growing up in California as a kid, we used to drive through LA, and you couldn't see a quarter of a mile off the road because of the smog.
Really?
You never saw the hills. You never saw anything. Wow. And to drive out there now and actually see the mountains,
you're like, wow.
It's a give and take on the whole.
Yeah, it's made some things more difficult, but people aren't suffocating in the smog and you can see stuff again.
Yeah. So anyway, that's why we relocated to Oklahoma.
You talking about yourself there, bud, Steven? You don't want to spend $300? No, I'm picking. Steven's got a really nice system in his Porsche.
So that's why we relocated here. But so I went to this show and looking at these cars, and it's amazing work that these guys are doing in the cars. This was probably 96, 97. The woofers and the audio equipment's not, it's good, but it's not up to the level of what these guys are doing in the cars. So, you go inside and they've got the gear shift knobs all billet machine and this, they're spending more money on the gear shift knob than they did on the woofers in the car. And we were looking at this one guy's car, this kid, and someone introduced me and said he has a speaker company. And this guy, oh my gosh, his eyes got this big. You have a speaker company. And he said, you must have made the best speaker in the world for yourself. And I got to thinking I hadn't done that. I've been chasing my tail, building stuff for everybody else. So
That's a good idea.
yeah, so it's not a bad idea. What if we just started building everything like we used to? And then, how good can we build something? Is there enough people out there? Well, that's about the time the internet starts going too, where you can get the word out. You don't have to just have giant magazine budgets and things. So
Yeah.
that was the start of getting back into our brand name and taking the designs that we had built for a long time and modifying them for car audio use. So and that's how DD Digital Designs kind of started back into the car market.
And this was like maybe 94, 5, 6 ish.
Yeah, mid to late 90s.
Mid
Yeah.
late 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the car I saw must have been one of the first really loud DD builds. This was in 98. I think it was in 98. It was this couple at Arizona, little Suzuki Sidekick, and they had two DD 95 18s in it. And the thing was just a trailer queen. It was all concrete and had two paintings of 18s below the two top 18s. It looked like it had four 18s, but it was just two. And it came to the show and just demolished everybody by like 20 dBs. It wasn't even close.
Yeah, that was Henry and Renee.
Apparently, it's Henry right here.
Right there, yeah, Henry Caldwell.
Hey, there you go. Okay, that's crazy. So I was at the show at Ron Canosa, a local guy still owns Audio Excellence, but it's a very small shop now. They used to have a few locations. But they would do a DB drag event the last Friday of every month. And there you go. It's in 99, 415s. Okay, so maybe it was 4 subs. So I made up some of it in my head.
You'll have that sometimes.
Yeah, first 170. Yeah, so they pull in, they demolish everybody at this Friday night show. And literally the next day on the internet, I ordered two 90 15s because I couldn't quite afford the 95.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my first big subs ever. And it was the best, really the best you can buy at the time as far as those subs that are meant to do that.
Yeah.
There wasn't really anything else available.
Dude, DD dominated from 98 to 2. I mean, still, DD subs are still some of the best things you can buy. That's just how it is.
It's so crazy that Henry's watching the show, and I've had this story about him for 30 years.
Well, so Brett Arsenault right here is the first loud build I ever heard. 4 DD 95 15.
Dude, I was a little kid, like going to a car show at 17 years old, and like,
dude, I was 16 when I heard Brett. I was 16 when I heard Brett's. Brett, what are the chances?
Henry and Renee pissed off a lot of people running around. Yeah.
They were running Harrison Labs amps. I remember too.
Yeah.
And I ordered that the next day as well. I was just literally like, what did I have? I had JLW3s at the time.
Bro,
and I was like, dude, this is not loud compared to what's going on over here. So
yeah. Stan Harrison. Yeah.
But so that's how I always based if I was loud or not yet. After I heard Brett's system, when I got into my car, did it seem loud? And the first time I got back into mine, I went, ooh, it's still loud. I'm getting there. That's how I determined how loud I was.
No, I think after I put up my measly 130 something and drove home, I was like, this is not happening. DD, what's this digital design stuff? I could afford those. I'm ordering those.
You're like, yeah, those are coming home to me.
I used to take pictures of them with like Coke cans next to them because the motors just seem so humongous. They were big, don't get me wrong, but I mean, compared to today's motors, they're kind of mid-sized. But
so Scott brings up the Civic that had the 8s and the acrylic tubes. That was one of the first like acrylic enclosures that I ever saw.
Yeah, they had three 8s facing backwards in the Civic. Yeah,
dude, it sounded so good. It was like,
all those original subs were basically PA subs on steroids. Overdamp motors. We just knew we needed a lot more throw in a vehicle because in a PA system you can just keep adding cabinets. But in a car, you only have so much room, so we just needed to get more excursion. But we kept that same model, just an overdamped, lightest moving mass that we could get, stiff and rigid. And then we've always done multiple spiders on things. And because we just want it to last. And, you know, I think one thing that was a little bit different back in the day too is most of our guys ran the same subs all season long, never changed anything. You know, most of the other places, everybody was swapping stuff out after every show or every run or something.
Yep, that was I've been told stories of like the original competition group at Kicker, like way back, that they would just have pallets of gear shipped to shows because they just knew that every burp was going to take out at least one sub minimum.
Yeah. The other benefit is just let people test more, you know, and then if you test more, you just get louder. You know, you figure stuff out. So
yep,
you don't have to worry about everything breaking as much, and it stays more consistent. Then you just get a lot more work in. So
testing is something that a lot of these companies, even today, refuse to do, and they rely on their consumers to be the testers. I'm like, man, that doesn't work.
In the end, it was always the vehicles that got loud. You know, the subs are just along for the ride. So it's all the tuning in the vehicle that made the difference.
But you could always just tell like what a good sub was, and the DD subs have always been just like next level.
So your design philosophy for subs started with PA, as you said, and you needed to make them have more throw, bigger motors. Is that still kind of the direction that you go? I mean, obviously over 30 plus years, or however long you said in the 80s, 40 years of designing speakers, you fine-tune that and figure different things out. But is it still kind of the base of how you do it, or has things changed a lot?
Necessity, we were talking before, necessity is the mother of invention, right? You know, so we ran up against things like in the 90s, you know, and you just solve problems. So the same process goes now as it did then. The amplifier power wasn't as big. People started using bigger boxes. Like when we first started doing car audio, transition from OEM to a brand to sell to places, and our overdamped big sub speakers, they don't work in seal boxes, you know. And the teal small parameters suck because they weren't designed for parameters. We knew how much space we had available in a vehicle. So this system that we developed of 16 square inches of port area per cubic foot, you know, 16 to 18 inches long, tunes, you know, back originally you could tune about 45, and over the years then it went to 42, then it went to 40, then 38, then 35. So you just lengthen the port, make the port a little bit bigger. But all that was based on, if you're going to be efficient, you have to get the energy that's going into the speaker, you know, out into the car. So we needed port area. And, you know, the way a speaker moves back then, port area ratios were maybe 8-to-1, sometimes 10-to-1 of the size of the port to the displacement of the driver. And the port just has to move too much. We first came across this when we were building these big systems for churches and cathedrals. We had a company that we built for that did electronic pipe organs. So when MIDI first started off, they could recreate, you know, 32-foot pedal stops and things electronically. So a lot of these places wanted to add that to their systems because they couldn't afford a giant pipe organ, but they could put a keyboard in and a bunch of subs. So when we use the traditional teal small parameters and port area things, you know, the bandwidth, the power that you get out of the sub was limited. So we started experimenting with just much larger port areas. Well, we got to the point that it was too much port area for the driver. You know, it didn't have enough motor force. It couldn't control everything. And you get into that, you know, that cone fluttering issue. So started putting bigger motors. Okay, now what we're really doing is we're just driving a port. That's the job that the sub really is going to do. It's going to just drive, you know, compress air inside the box, which is going to move the port. So we started getting bigger and bigger ports. So the whole DD woofer system that started off from the studio sub went through this design process. So how do we drive a port really hard and keep distortion and things down? And that ended up being what sounded the best in the vehicles. So we knew it sounded good. It got loud. You could throw any kind of power you wanted on it. It was good. You take teal small parameters and look at it, and it's horrible on a computer. So we said the hardest thing to do back in the day was convince these guys, yeah, don't put this in a computer. Just trust us.
Yeah.
It's a 12, 2.5 cubic foot box times 16 square inches of port area. Make the port this long, stick it in the car, and it's going to hammer. And there was a hard road trying to convince people to do that.
Would you say that like DD had I mean, it sounds like it has a pretty influential hand in getting car audio to move towards ported enclosures? Because obviously everything was sealed forever. And then it sounds like you pretty much figured out that it could get way more output and the base that we all like out of building these big ported enclosures. So
yeah, I think with guys like Brett and Henry and people you guys saw that were out there, started to build those enclosures and it was working. Prior to that, the only ported enclosures were really that I saw was maybe coming from Servan Vega. And those were Fairchild had designed some boxes that were out there, and those were in quite a few vehicles for quite a. I mean, that's what dominated for a while. But it wasn't. They weren't big on port area, and it was still kind of halfway between the sealed box walls and the ported walls. And then when we started driving big port area, you started seeing vans move from 12s. With little ports in all four corners of each individual box to, what happens if we put 415s and half of it is just a giant port. And,
but it also had to be like your 15s. Because, I mean, obviously the subs you were building, designing weren't exactly designed the same as everybody else's. So, I mean, it sounded like, to me, people had to play catch up. Now they figured out, they saw what you guys were doing and how much louder it was. Now they had to design subs to work in ported enclosures because you guys, that's what made your subs shine so much. And it turned out that it was just louder than everybody else. Now everybody had to catch up to you guys.
It most likely had an effect like that. Yeah. I don't know exactly.
I have no idea.
The loudest. There's a reason DD took over so much of the loudest stuff for so long is they were pushing for stuff like that. Absolutely.
Well, and we didn't even know there were SPL contests when we started building these drivers. It just, people started buying them and using them. And because we were not that affiliated with car audio market, we were on the OEM side of things. So I didn't know what an SPL contest was. When some of the other manufacturers called and asked, can we build speakers for that stuff?
You were like, I guess.
Sure, we can build that. Yeah.
John, so if you're looking for specific like enclosure tuning, the tuning of the enclosure itself has nothing to do with the driver that's in it. It's completely just the airspace, the port area, port length, port volume, etc.
Yeah, it's a Helmholtz resonator. So
yeah, it's got nothing to do with the driver going in it. So
yeah, the box doesn't care what speaker's in it.
And then, there's a lot of factors about boxes that people just ignore or just don't know. Like the shape of your enclosure matters a lot. The layout of the enclosure matters a lot. Like you could take two enclosures, same airspace, make one deep, make one tall but shallow, and the deeper one, further front to back, is gonna sound better if the sub is facing the deeper side.
Yeah,
it's just the sub has more. Loading isn't the right word, but it's just the sub is happier, if you will.
Well, loading has a lot to do with it, though, and the programs are a lot better now. But here's what it just takes a little bit of expertise too with people who know certain vehicles and
how the vehicle reacts is a big thing.
And that's where good dealers really come into play that have that kind of experience.
Which is why MST was so good for so long. They knew vehicles.
And then that bore out another group of people like you that knew that stuff. And as the stores didn't really have that much expertise, they're going to lean on you guys because you know what loading is and how vehicles operate, how they work, and you can get a good system done.
I feel like I picked up a lot of it from Brett back then, just being able to look at a vehicle, look at an enclosure, be like, okay, that's not going to work. That's going to work. Just from looking at it, just it's something about them just makes sense in my head. Now, day to day common sense life, I struggle, but enclosures, I got that.
Yeah, especially when you're dealing with like small drivers and you're trying to get all that energy with these big amps today. Like when we do our 1506s and 2508s, you're trying to control a lot of amplifier power now, and you have very little cone area to move all that power and connect it to the air load in the vehicle. So loading becomes real important. How do you transfer that energy? And that's like how horns work. You got to transfer the energy from that driver to the air.
Yeah. Was there a specific year or event or anything like that basically kicked off to you that we are now a car audio player company? Like I wouldn't say just like one of the giant big dogs or whatever, but that you transitioned to being more of just like a car audio speaker company versus doing some studio stuff, doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like to where it became your identity, I guess. Was there something you could think of, or was there a certain point in time that kind of like popped the lid off of it, or was it just grew over time?
It grew over time, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, guys like Mike Jones, he had this little Starion that he took to World Finals, and he beat like everybody, Alma, crazy stuff. And then he had a van that came out after that. And we were always more of like the giant killers because we were the small little company and everybody had much deeper pockets than we did. So like Henry and Renee going to shows, they're going up against monster builds, and these are people just building everything in their garage. And comparatively, we were the same, small little company.
Brett's arch nemesis.
Brett had like 6 employees or something, and we're at finals. We might have half the cars in the final 4 rounds were DD cars. Which we had no resources. We couldn't even afford T-shirts for everybody. So it's a big disparity between us and the thems out there. But it just kept growing, and we just kept sticking with it, and trying to make stuff better.
And I mean, it obviously works. So
the biggest difference, I think, was we never built an SPL driver. We just built good, strong drivers.
If you notice,
we were building them, we didn't know where they were going to go. They might go in an SPL car, but a store that had our products like MST, he could build a system for a customer, and then he could take the same driver if somebody was wanting to build a World Finals type car. So the amount of SKUs that we had to build were less, but it was applicable to just about anything you wanted to do. So we kind of likened ourselves to Snap-on of things. You can take this speaker and do just about anything you want to do with it.
You know what's crazy? That's the same basic philosophy that Jacob Fuller has always had. Make a speaker that just sounds good, performs well, and people use it for everything.
Yeah.
And now look, I mean, some of the best subs I've ever owned, DD, Sundown, this new L7X is fantastic. But what are the chances that y'all would have the same basic philosophy in that and both be at the top of the game? Almost like there's something to that. Almost like there's something to that. But I was going to bring up Brett's.
People will use it.
I was going to bring up Brett's arch nemesis from back in the day, Fred. Don't remember his last name, but Fred had DD Z3s or just Zs, I guess. 415s on like 8 M3s or 8 M4s. And poor Brett was trying his hardest to beat Fred, street beat. Let's think it should be 3. Fred has always had Brett's number. Poor Brett.
What was the year the first your Z Neo sub came out? When did you first release that?
Steve has the good questions.
Yeah. Early 2000s. We were trying to remember back to like what year the first ones came out.
You said you never made an SPL sub. Is that not an SPL sub, or was it just
Oh no. It's just a strong ass motor, man.
strong? It's just a strong sub that just happens
Take
to
for
be.
example, like the Sundown, like the first team motor, the big Team Neo sub.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, now there has since been SPL versions like the compact, but the first Neo sub from Sundown was just a big ass music sub.
So you're just building the best sub you could build, and it just happens to.
So
really...
so the Z subs or versions, I mean, we have people that have copied it. So I don't know, most of the loudest scores ever have probably been on either our sub or a version of our sub. And at the same year, if you go to the EMA finals in Europe, there's winning cars have Z subs in the sub section same year. Yep. The only thing different is maybe it's not as stiff because it's built for a different power band.
And speaking of, I have a 9918 in my climate control storage. I have it's a recon like a year ago, I guess, with a soft suspension for sound quality.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, take like God, his name just Nathan Milliard in Texas, right? Isn't that where he's at? In Texas?
Yeah, DD Tech in Texas.
You know, he's got Z's in that thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, over the years, it was always kind of thought of that a Z was an SPL high frequency driver meant just to do numbers. And then you see it in a build like his, and it's doing, I don't know, almost a 70, a 20, just like smashing low frequencies and sounding amazing doing all of it. So, yeah, there are some, there's like some things that stick to the may have stuck to you guys because you've done so well in the lanes. Maybe people think you're just an SPL driver, but it couldn't be further from the truth. You never designed it just for SPL. It just does it. And that's something I had no clue about.
It works as well as the person who knows his system can tailor it. So if you need a softer suspension, you got a certain bandwidth that you're trying to play, then we can make that. So
this was actually, how long ago is this? 12 years. This is a 95Z, so baby Z, on like 4,000 watts maybe. And it's just playing normal music. One sub. I'm gonna skip to the sub. That's it.
Yeah.
Sounded great. Still one of the best sounding subs I've ever had.
We should take a single 9515 and a CRX in the back, 5 cubic foot box, a couple of big amplifiers on it, and I'd play 150 something all day down there, just hammering away.
Yep.
So it's the 9918 that was sent to Carlos has basically identical soft parts that was sent. That is for the Nathan's Got in the Tank.
Yeah.
It's just a musical sub,
dude. And they always have been.
It's just the long throw, demo type durable sub that should last somebody, years in the right application.
Yeah. That's one thing I like that you've said a few times is you're building stuff to last. Like engineering obsolescence into products is a thing that's been a part of our world for the last 20 or 30, maybe
not a DD
longer. And it sucks. Like I got a $2,000 refrigerator I bought 10 years ago that's probably about to go, and everything's about to go. So it's nice to hear that you're building stuff that isn't meant to just break so you could sell more stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the recent innovations, like we were talking about the new spiders and things, that's a lot of what those are about. It's just they'll last a long time, and they stay consistent. So they don't just last, but once they break into a certain point, it just kind of stays the same. So
which is a big thing.
Yeah, you get that performance level for years, you can just play it.
Yeah.
So Brett said he's saw a Mustang and Heatwave 2010 had a wall with 4 DD18s. That's got to be Richard Mallard, or it got to be. I remember he had a walled Mustang with DD stuff in it at one point. It had to be him, or yeah, sounds like Richard Mallard.
Yeah.
The first 170 I ever saw in a stock cabin was here at one of the showdowns. It was Andrew McCain. 4 of them in an Astro. Yeah, popped a 170. He had
first no 170 I ever saw was DD.
4 Z amps, Z2Cs, I think they were.
Yeah, the first no 170 I ever saw was Z's. And
I think like Hertz Audio had a couple of 95s. I think they were the first with 2 drivers do a 70. And then I think Nathan was the first one to do it with 1 driver.
Oh yeah, Nathan Munson did a 170 with a single 10.
Yeah,
that's wild.
In Pumpkin, his orange Extreme car.
Yeah.
What would be a fun thing for Carlos to do is see who could send him the smallest sub to do the highest number.
Smallest sub is still doing 80
or whatever.
Let's call it a 70 because like 80 is a lot. Smallest sub is still do a 70.
6.5, a single 6.5.
I don't have a ground run in front of
that thing works on the ratios of that enclosure to the vehicle would be,
yeah. Steven, what kind of battery bank are you running on the back? What kind of alternator?
If he altered the ratios, I think but
so
I think if he made the sealed chambers correct for each driver,
or at least shrinking for the size at least.
Yeah. But cone area obviously has a lot to do with it. I don't know how much pressure a 6.5-inch cone can actually build. There's probably a limit somewhere.
Oh, definitely a limit.
Yeah.
So what's next for DD? What's coming up that people should be looking out for?
A lot of what's happened in the last year and a half was just refinement. Trying to make all the drivers better. What's nice, like the red line, the 600, 700, 800s, we can build at as good a technology as we can get overseas. They're nice drivers based on what we've always done. What they allow us to do on the American lines is kind of frees us up. We don't have to worry about what it costs to build this cone, what it costs to build this kind of spider, what it costs to hand build the things.
That's one thing where a lot of the basic community, I guess people in general kind of struggle with like, oh, they're selling this mass production thing. Like, yeah, they have to sell something to the consumer, the average consumer, to be able to afford to develop this new technology.
Yeah.
Like development money isn't free. It's got to come from somewhere.
And they're really good, so I have no qualms about telling any friends that this is their budget that they can spend.
Casey, you're late, bud. We already talked about the DD DSP. Where you been, man? We talked about this an hour ago. Slacking, bro. You better go watch it. After we finish, go back and watch it.
Yeah, I would use them in my car. So, they're good drivers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So it allows us to do more custom things on the U.S. side because there's parts we can do here that you just can't do anywhere else. So, and there's people who want that, so there needs to be both sides of that market.
Absolutely.
And one allows us to do that on the other side.
And there's the larger majority of the market doesn't want that. They don't want to pay for.
Yeah. And if you look at, we're talking about subs there, but you can also look at amplifiers that same way. So the high voltage style amplifiers that have kind of been the rage lately because it's just cost less to build those amplifiers. And we have, an SS2000 that came out. We got a 3000 that's getting ready to come out. It's a little bit of a hybrid design. It's not a traditional high voltage amp because those were originally designed to do a lot of mids and highs. But subwoofers are more current animals. They still need current. Yep. So we've kind of done a in-between design that using big toroids and things so we can deliver the current to the subs. And when you're off the impedance curve that you're not endangering the amplifier. but still the cost to build those amps is less than it is to build a traditional half bridge amplifier. So, I see these debates out there, are half bridge amplifiers dead? Well, they're never going to be as cost effective as a high voltage design, but they have some attributes about them that a high voltage amp isn't going to be able to do. So they'll coexist in the market. Now, the cheaper ones inevitably are going to take more and more of the market. And then it's up to like companies like us. Is it worth it to keep these alive because they are better and they are nicer, and at what level can these stay in the market? And then where you have to find the price points that the masses are going to hit and still deliver a quality product to them too. So it happens on the sub side, the amp side, like guys talking about the DSPs. So we know, we need to have more than the one DSP. So we've got a family of them we're working on so that they're right for the application. And that's where the market, it's changed quite a bit since COVID and the way people buy things. So had to really reevaluate what products you're making and who's using them and are they the right product for the right application.
So, Stephen, when they say high voltage, they're talking about the power supply side, not so much the input voltage.
Correct. Yeah.
Talking about on the inside of the amplifier.
Yeah.
Blake can probably give you a pretty good rundown in the comments real quick. So what exactly is the mini half bridge Korean amp like Z12000?
So the reason the Z12000 is going to be smaller is we're just using a lot bigger and more robust devices. And so we don't need to use as many. So the current capability of the devices are higher. So instead of having to use 16, maybe we could use 8. And the capacity of those 8 is actually higher than the capacity of the 16 that we were using before.
DD was one of the first companies to come out with these smaller half bridge amps. That's an SNI based design, isn't it? Like their newest generation stuff.
They build those, and then there's some hurdles with that our engineering staff's worked on.
Oh, yeah, you can always tell that DD doesn't just take SNI's board and go, that'll work, do that.
Right.
There's a reason DD amps are always the highest quality. You go in and be like, no, we want to do this, like this, make this better, make this better.
We've done high-powered amps long enough to know where things are going to mess up, and we like to repair everything that we make. So, like, we still fix subs that we built in the 90s. We have parts for that stuff, and if we don't have those exact parts, we've got upgraded parts for those. And we still fix all of our amplifiers, and we fix them here. We do all of that here on the city.
Power supplies too.
So,
that's awesome.
Yep, I got 3 of the 100 amp power supplies, and I made a boo-boo. I was playing around with stuff I shouldn't have been playing around with. I broke one.
Yeah.
Look, I wasn't trying to charge my Tahoe all at once at 300 amps of power. Look, that's not what I was trying to do, okay? It wasn't my fault. It was clearly Casey Elston's fault. But I called Jack, hey, I broke one. He's like, oh, send it in. We'll fix it over here. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I haven't shipped it yet, but it's been like a month. But don't worry about that. But the fact that DD can fix that stuff is awesome.
Guys, I got to run. I've got to go pick up my trailer and do more show stuff. Jassa, thank you so much for joining us. This was a good discussion. I learned a lot about DD that I did not know about.
And actually, you may want to hold on one second. I have a question about DD and the sister company that y'all sold or spun off or something. What was SoundCube's original origin? Like, what was the reality behind it? Because I heard all kinds of stories throughout the years.
The way it started was my dad was retired and he was looking for something to do. And at the time, we put a lot of time in engineering and all the DD subs, and we were getting knocked off by people that just use cheaper parts and this and that. So he wanted to do a line of subs that
Okay.
Could
So
be
what I heard
sold.
was accurate. Cool.
Yeah, so that it could be sold. He sold direct, what we built was not a DD sub, but kind of what everybody else was building, with maybe just still using U.S. parts and not having to sub parts out. And he enjoyed it, and he got to hang out with people and gave him something.
I did a ton of stuff with SoundCubed. That was actually my entry back into car audio after I kind of got out for a couple of years. Was 3 SoundCube HDC 312s on a single 6K with a single AGM battery.
Yeah.
Did a 155 in no wall nitro. Boy, them HDC3s just ate it up.
When I came back into audio after having my daughter and being gone for a little bit, it was Audio Cubed at the time.
Right.
Yep.
And the AQ 2200, I believe, was just a powerhouse, tiny amp.
Oh, dude, I sold
that just kind of like
so many of those in.
blazed the trail through the lanes for like right when it came out. It was just everybody was using this amp, it was making a ton of power, all the loud builds, and it was like, oh, what is this Audio Cube? You know, I was gone for a while, and yeah, just another DD caught my eye when I was
right. Every time, dude.
There's another
DD
product.
DD has been at the forefront of so many people doing this, and a lot of people just don't realize it. I talk about it all the time. And then now hearing these super great sounding speakers that coming out with, they had great sound speakers before with the Germans, but I'm excited to see what the future holds.
And we'll get you some advanced sets as they come available. It'll be fun. Yeah.
Birdman hand rub.
I've been having fun playing with them, so it's good fun.
Well, Steve, you go get your trailer. We're gonna chit chat for a couple more minutes.
All right, boys. I'll see you soon.
Later. We'll see you at some show this year, man.
Absolutely. Have a good night.
Later, dude.
All right.
But yeah, there's like we could go on for hours about all the stuff.
So like the SoundCube stuff really was in the Audio Cube. We didn't do as much extensive ventilation in the motor, so there was, but nobody else was either except for us.
Yeah.
So there was some things that it was a really good.
Oh no, they were great.
Yeah.
Casey, I will not be in Vegas this weekend. Brandy's yearly award thing called the Addies, the Advertisers Award Ceremony. They have regional events, and hers is this weekend, Saturday. So I will be there supporting her because she supports me at all these events. So I'm gonna go support her. I'm gonna wear my bright colored shirt. It's gonna be a good time. I tried to find a flight that made sense to bring me in like Thursday and then come home Saturday during the day, but I was like, you know what? I'll miss this one. It's gonna suck, but gotta support the wife. She supports me in so much. But yeah, and also I get to hang out with the fancy people for at least a night. Oh man. So, is there anything that you want to bring up? Anything in particular you wanted to talk about tonight?
No, it's just more interesting what if anybody has questions or clarify things, So.
Let's see if I started a couple questions. Oh, I wanted to bring up this guy's fine dining. He was talking about the mid-bass power being a waste. Wrong. Overhead and having available dynamic power is never a waste. There was a study done, I think it was Jail that did it, said to have 100% distortion-free power through the largest possible crest factor in music they could find, you needed 10x rated power on mid-range drivers to never possibly clip the signal, based upon the largest crest factor from the average loudness to the peak output, 10x power. So you can never have too much dynamic headroom. Is there still being research done into cooling methods? This was answered, so yes. Even said he had, I asked, Coventry 40, you need to run front to back grounds. Specifically with lithium, with how fast lithium can charge, you need as equal power and ground runs as you can get, because with DC, it's not a one-way power. It's both ways constantly. So if one is limited, the whole system's limited. Yes, pair up, but we're working on. We working on it.
Yeah.
We working on it. Don't you worry. We're in process. We've already started building a vehicle. DD doesn't know it. We've already started putting the vehicle together. I said I'm working on it. See, like so. Nick started a build. My brother, he has a cab truck, 2000 model, but it's OBS. Excuse me. We're starting off with some downward sound stuff just to get it built, to get some testing done. But as this new DD stuff comes out, that's going to be that's going to be the test bed for it. I'm very excited.
So the tweeter that you have there is
The best tweeter I've ever heard in my entire life.
yeah,
I know.
and it's a excellent, but it's conventional type tweeter. So we have versions we've been working on for this last year that's an extended bandwidth of that tweeter. So we can get the FS down crazy low to where we can start crossover points at around 1,000 cycles. So
That's so low for a tweeter. I mean, that almost eliminates the need for a mid-range as long as the volume.
Well,
you'd be limited by volume, but
yeah. But what it really does is, the vocal image is going to follow where the bulk of the vocals come from, and usually it's going to be lower in the vehicle if that's where your mid-range is at. But if we can get a full-range device to cover most of that, and your A pillar or on your dash is where that device is going to be, we can then lift all the imaging up in the car. So that's where the bulk of the work's been going. But it's real tough on diaphragms, it's tough on suspensions, and tough on everything. But
I mean, that's
the first set that's coming out, that's in production right now, result of all this work, is going to be a very affordable set, like under $300 retail.
These tweeters that I have here, I think on the website are $189 pair, and they're too cheap. They're too cheap.
That would
you
not
need
be
to double the price immediately, right now. Go do it. Go double it right this second. Grab the keyboard, double, because I've told some of my SQ friends about them, and they very much respect my opinion on things. And one of the guys said, "Man, I'm gonna be honest. I think they're too cheap to sound as good as you're saying they sound." I said, "Man, I'm telling you, they sound."
Yeah, they wouldn't.
What a disaster! You all missed out.
Yeah, they wouldn't be sold at that price normally. It was just it's transitioning out of one thing and into this whole new line. So
gotcha. That makes sense. That makes sense.
We wanted, and it's been so long since we've had this stuff available. We wanted to get a little bit of a buzz out there, so when we follow it up with these other things, that it's not just into a vacuum. So
I think that was one thing I told Jack. I was like, bro, how are people not talking about these?
Yeah,
they're great. And I have some my trucks actually at my buddy's shop right now. He's working on trying to make these big pods that I built look good in the truck. And as soon as he's done, these tweeters and mids are going in the truck, and they're probably what I'll compete with at Aggie Land this year, which is like the big event of the year. So I'm very excited to do so. Which model tweeter? The AT28.
28. Yeah. So it's a multi-chamber cavity back tweeter. It's got a nice bandwidth. It's a great diaphragm. Works really good, and we're a couple generations past that one right now when those come back out.
A couple generations.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, I know to a lot of people I seem dramatic about how good they are, but I've heard over the last year or two some of the best sounding speakers ever created. The Scan Speaks, Focal, Utopia M's,
Yeah.
C7, all this stuff. They sound so good.
So material science has changed quite a bit recently. So it's allowing things that we just couldn't do before.
Wait a second. Oh, look who this is. I recognize that CRX. Sorry. So what's changed in the last year?
Like metal alloys. We can get lighter and stiffer than we could get before. The surround materials have advanced, so we can get more excursion without hysteresis. And on tweeters and things, that's a big thing, because tiny little energy differences from one side to the other side cause problems. So as material science has gotten better, it's allowed some things to happen that 5 years ago we just couldn't do it.
So, I have a question specific about the A series. What does the soft dust cap do?
On the woofers?
On the mid ranges too, I believe, aren't they?
Mid range, yeah. In that application, it's a little bit of a dampener, So, and the frequency bandwidth that we wanted on that speaker, it helped to contain that bandwidth. So if you use more of a radiating dust cap, you can alter the sound because you can extend the frequency response. You can overlap where its frequency response is at versus the cone's frequency response. You can go extend it past the cone's frequency response because it's very close to the voice coil, and that's where all your vibrations are starting. So the glues that you use to glue the former to the cone, that affects your energy transfer. And what frequencies get passed through. So all of those things you're using to tune to the bandwidth that you're trying to get to.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Because that was the first things I noticed when I pulled these out of the box. And I was like looking at it and just typical guy. I was like, let me poke stuff. Let me see how it feels. I was like, oh, that cone's really solid. And almost like put my finger through the dust cap. I was like, ooh, no.
Yeah, that one's super soft on that one.
And they sound, like I said, they sound fantastic. I know I say it every time I'm live, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Casey, get out of here. Asking those silly questions. That's a question for Jack anyway. Oh, man. So anyone else have any questions? We still got 50 people viewing at the moment, even though we're pushing 10 o'clock. 11 o'clock on the East Coast. Freaking Casey. So Casey has one of the most beautiful DD builds that I've seen in a long time. Casey, send me some pictures, man. Don't worry, tell me about them in DM all the time. I'm telling you, they're good. Full range 2 3/4.
So we do have one of those right now, and there will be some additional full ranges coming with this new release of stuff.
Awesome. So we have a DSP coming. DD Mini Z8. Ooh, I think I've seen this question asked a couple times tonight.
Yeah. No, that'll happen again. They're just limited run items.
Expensive to produce, I'm sure.
Yeah, so it's a specialized market, but and the thing's got such wicked motor force. On an 8, depends on how you want to manipulate it. But there'll be another Mini 8. It's not going to be exactly like the other one, so it's having some tweaks done to it. Same with the Z's right now.
Casey beat me to it. I was about to scroll through our conversation to pull a bunch of photos so I can show off his build to people. Because Casey's all DD, man. He's all in.
We appreciate that.
I can't remember what his last build was, but it caught. Actually, it was Z's. I know that it was Z's before, and it caught fire, unfortunately. And I don't remember how much was saved, but I know the motors were saved, and he ended up being able to reuse the motors at least. He had to hand polish the motors back to life. Let me scroll through. I'm looking for some photos of it all lit up because it is just gorgeous. Oh, here's something. That is him flipping the camera off. Okay, so actually here we'll just video. I'm gonna mute it. So it's two 21-inch Z4s in a Gately enclosure.
Nice with the LEDs, yeah.
Underside lit up. Z315s. Those aren't 15s. Those are 21s. Oh, his last one was Z315s.
Oh.
I was like, those aren't 15s. But the mirror on the bottom of the enclosure, you can see the cones. And then let's pull up some photos.
21s with a soft suspension sound really good too. It's like the best sound quality driver ever.
Exactly. Very minimal movement.
Doesn't have to move hardly at all. It's just so fast.
All right, so it's a Scion XB.
Wow.
We got license plate, DD audio. No, it's a killer build.
Yeah.
So the cones obviously light up from LEDs on the backside, which I didn't know they would. There we go. Absolutely awesome build.
It's got them nice and shiny.
Yep. No, the build is top notch. Top notch. So he's just waiting for that DD DSP. He already said earlier. He said he's like, because we talked about it earlier, and I told him like, oh, go watch the start of the video. He said, I'm not going to watch it. Just send an invoice. I was like, that's the best customers ever.
Yeah, there's a couple of them coming. So,
any progress on a 6 or 8 channel amplifier we discussed before? Ooh, my man said we discussed it. Where are they at?
we have them. It's just picking the right power in the market and seeing where everybody's at. And what features like a 6 or 8 channel amp need to have now with all the DSPs out there. Because if you load up the preamp with a bunch of stuff, and everybody's using DSPs, do we really need that? Or do we just clean the preamp up?
Put just a sensitivity adjustment in there.
Yeah.
Which that's we have a prototype amp.
Market is changing a lot. And then like what size do they need to be? Because if you go there's a lot of big 6 and 8 channel Class ABs, and like, where do you put it? If it's an ultimate sound quality thing, and you're back to the Class D side, then it's got to be a high speed Class D, to sound good. And so there's a lot of variables, and just trying to pick the right path.
Yeah, that's one of the things that it takes time.
Yeah,
but that's picking out how much power that they need to make is such a big thing, because it depends on who you ask. You're going to get totally different answers.
Yeah.
Even in my own applications, where like my Duramax, my daily driver SQ vehicle, I don't need a ton of power. I think the most power I have on the mid bases is I have 200 watts rated, which is a lot of power because it's bridged, but it's not that much power. Right. In my Tahoe, I'm like, no, I need like 1,000 watts of mid. That'd be great. That'd be awesome.
And on mids and high amps these days, what impedance do you want to make that power? Like on a traditional amp, if it's 2 ohm stereo, unless you're running 2 ohm drivers, you're only using 60% of your amplifier. So,
yep.
There's in optimizing size and footprint and power delivery, there's other questions today of what's the best solution. So
it looks like Brett asked about a Z6 ever coming out. Casey said we're going to skip the Z5.
Yeah, we will skip the Z5. We've built Z6s before, and there's in all probability a Z6.
Casey, how do you feel about that? They've made Z6 and you don't have them. How do you feel about that? Oh, let's talk about the beer you're drinking. I'm sure a lot of people will like that. Where's that beer from?
Yeah, so we have a craft brewery here in Oklahoma City. It's called Go for Broke Brewing. So come by and have a beer with us.
Is that yours? Is that y'all's yours?
Yeah. And Charn, that's been like, he worked on the last Z series stuff over here. He's actually running a brewery right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Also, another odd coincidence of Sundown. Jacob Fuller owns part of a distillery.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but they do like vodka and whiskey and stuff. So odd how much similarities all these two top companies can have. Yes, he's gonna call me screaming tomorrow. Where the Z6 is at? In time. Yeah, but Casey, are you good with them though? I mean, you definitely want more, right? Man, I tell you what, If I had a nickel for every time an Oklahoma cardio company had a brewery associated with it, I'd have 2 nickels. It's a lot, but it that happened twice. Wait, who's up? Kicker has one?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, they actually opened the second, so.
I did not. I don't think I knew that, or I knew they might have been associated with one, but I didn't think they were like directly involved. That's cool.
Yeah.
And for those who don't get that reference of what he said, go watch more TV. Odd that it happened twice.
Music and beer.
It's also odd that that Brett is awake now. He's a pawpaw. He should be asleep by now. You won't do it, Brett. You won't do it. I am lacking on my kicker knowledge, which is crazy. What are the chances? So, is there anything that I tried to come up with questions and things before the show, but I was like, I'm not good. I'm not good at that. I wasn't nearly as good as Steve was. Steve had some great questions. Oh. Well, do y'all have any more questions in the comments? What y'all got? I'm tapped out for now. Though I'm sure that once we get off about 30 minutes from now, I'll be like, oh, I should have asked this. I should have asked that. We still got 50 people in here. That's crazy. What was so PWK, Peter Walter Kalinske, I think is the full name. He was doing some of the craziest designs ever for DD back in the day. What was there ever like a formal relationship with him, or was he just doing great work?
He was just doing work for people, and we just referred them to him, like kind of we did with you a little bit, and guys.
Gotcha. Now, I remember the first time I ever heard a really crazy low playing system was a guy named Matt Scheckschneider down here. He worked at MST. 4 DD 3515s on an original M3 at 0.18 ohm or something silly. Peaked at 17 hertz. It was just crazy low playing. BSI sound processor.
The BSI is a sound processor that takes a high voltage input. Sometimes you get on your subwoofer outs, and then it's got, recreates bass an octave below, one of those things.
Oh, it's like an epicenter.
Similar to that, I guess. And then, but you can actually tune the peak and the cutoff. So yeah, you can use it like a bass extension thing, or say you have a sealed box and you want to extend the low end, you can use it to tune that enclosure lower electronically.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
So it's called like an electronically assisted alignment. So you can use it both ways.
Gotcha. See, Kevin Smoot says, can you please tell Jessa, from a huge GD Audio family member and supporter, thank you for all you've done and keep doing to give us the best.
Wow. Thanks, and I appreciate it.
What's the major difference between DD and SoundCube mid-price subwoofers? Are you talking about like current? I mean, I guess their current subs are the same as they were prior to the split up, but he did go over that the SoundCube subs had I think a little less cooling and a little bit less of the more advanced technology of the larger DD subs.
The current ones, I don't know so much the changes they've done, but there's going to be considerable difference. Their motor design's different. The motor design that like HDS's versus like 600 or 700, and then the cones are made in different places, and we tool our own.
Yeah, so at this point they're totally different.
Right.
We did talk about the A series that I like, and how the ones that I have that I think are fantastic are 3 generations of development behind now, which mind blowing.
Yeah. A lot of that's bandwidth.
Jay, if you've never had DD, you absolutely you should. DD is some great equipment. But your comment DD B4, that reminds me of some of the best amps that I've seen and I've heard. The S4B, the S2B, the SS4B, SS4, some of the original like big silver amps, big 2-channel.
Yeah, those are all Sanken output devices, and there was individual bias on all the devices, and it was pretty slick, but
those
limited market a bit.
They were very slick, and we were using them to. My buddy had a pair of them, the S2Bs, powering some 2515s or 3515s in the trunk of his Lincoln Town car. That was definitely the market for those amps. I know it was.
We did a T45 too for 3 years, a tube amplifier for cars. It's
what?
Great
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I did not know that at all. What a
basic. If you come up, I'll show it to you. We got a couple of them still around here.
Absolutely going to check that out.
Yeah.
Might have missed it, but was there a comparison for longer throw subs like what Sundown makes versus the style DD makes? There was no direct comparison, but a lot of but from what I noticed, a lot of the philosophies that DD has had of making just a quality, good sounding driver is the same thing that Sundown has. Quality, good sound, just make it work, make it sound right, good parts, and you're gonna have a high performance driver. I mean, I would compare the DD subs and the Sundown subs as they sound a little different, but they both sound great. You got Blake on one now. There's a tube amp. He's headed back to the office right now. He's in the car.
He's still new. He's not privy to everything yet.
So. Man, Blake, you're not in there yet. Yep, customer service is such a big thing. What do you have for your home audio setup?
It changes. Right now, I have a old Pioneer 1080 receiver and a Nakamichi Dragon cassette deck and some Magnapan speakers, old Rotel turntable.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's entertaining. Yeah, I like it.
Glenn, absolutely worth going back and taking a listen. And absolutely an incredible guest to have. Whenever I got a call a couple weeks ago about him being on, I was like, what? You're kidding me. I'm in for that. Because I mean, you're not. I don't think you're very active on social media at all. So
no, I'm not.
So we don't. No one really engages with you directly. So no one really knows the man behind DD. And I feel like, and me and you we've talked maybe twice ever, and it was in passing once while I was getting a tour. But I knew just from the products you make and the people you keep around DD, I was like, this dude's got to be a solid guy. It just has to be. And then the few things I've heard, stop it, Brett. And just the few things I've heard of you explaining things, I was like, man, this guy's got it.
Hey,
definitely.
Brett, we talked on the phone many times. So,
Brett, you might just not have known it, bud. You might. They was playing mind tricks on you. You just thought you were talking to some random guy. Psych. So they ended up so he actually went over this a bit ago. Cabinet manufacturing in California went under due to a bunch of regulations, and they went out to Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And I did always think it was odd that they were, DD and Kicker within an hour of each other.
It's odd too. Like Oklahoma City had, Altec was out here, University Sound was out here. James B. Lansing left from the East Coast, came and helped found Altec Lansing. That's where Lansing comes from. Then he left here and went out and started JBL. So there was a lot of audio happening here in Oklahoma City for one reason or the other. And so when we came here in the 90s, there were already cabinet shops that knew how to build audio cabinets, which is different than building other stuff. It's
Absolutely.
a learning curve. And so it was, it helped us at the time because we could deal with, half a dozen shops that knew all the in and outs of making high quality cabinets.
The damping factor on the M series are a lot higher than the D and Z series. Is that a key factor?
It's actually not any higher than the Z, because the Z is a similar amplifier as the M. It's the same type of circuit, just a lot more of it. And the Ds are completely different amplifiers, but
I personally haven't. I've never looked at an amplifier spec and went looking for damping factor information.
Damping factor is a bit of a misnomer because it's a ratio of output impedance. So it's not. It's kind of like X max on a subwoofer. You can look at that like the higher number is a better number, but it's really
it's being measured in the same way as everybody else.
Yeah, and then it's just not. I mean, output ratio differences is not that big of a deal.
Yep. There's a bunch of small specs and parameters that people focus on that in the end don't matter that much. Kind of like X-Max, because there's such a large misunderstanding of it.
When things are done wrong, there can be a low damping factor, but it's.
But as long as you have a quality amplifier, it's something that I don't think I've never even considered it. Even when putting together the SQ build or talking to these SQ guys who are building the best sounding vehicles on the planet, I've never heard once a mention of damping factor.
There's so many other things that you can do wrong in an amplifier that have a much greater effect. And it happens all the time in the cheapening down of components and parts to hit price points these days. It's
it's the same thing that people, when they're streaming signal quality, people are like, oh, I've just streamed my audio in the best resolution or the best this and the best that. I'm like, man, or what's the best resolution I should stream my Spotify in? It's like, man, by the time that matters in your system, like, you're not asking that question anymore, because there's so many other things that are going to make your system better first. That won't matter.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we got.
A lot of places to skimp on amplifiers, and it's something we don't do. So we don't sell any catalog amplifiers. All of ours are ones that we do. So,
is there a competition governing body that has a class that puts more emphasis on records at lower frequencies? I think USAC has a class. Actually, I think everyone has a class. DB Drag has Cyclone. USAC has bass battles. Yeah, bass battles. Yeah, I think every org has some type of low frequency class. We're gonna start charging for your signature. Hey, if people will pay it, charge for it. Simple as that, bud. Simple as that. If I told y'all how much money that man makes on signatures, it's a lot. Is the DD Audio Studio in OKC available for tours? Not for you, bud. Not for you. Not for you. $10. Bass Wars. Brett would know about Bass Wars. He's actually, I think he was a 3X champion this year in Bass Wars, a bunch of different classes. He did real good this year. JL prided themselves on Slash Year's dampening. They probably did.
Yeah. It's not to say that dampening isn't a good thing.
No, I mean, it
just shouldn't be what you're focusing on, because there's so many other things to do well in an amplifier besides output impedance ratios. So
yep. I mean, but that's like X-Max. A lot of people focus on that number and be so gotta have high X-Max. And then I saw a post yesterday that maybe, like, I already knew people don't understand what it is, because companies measure it in so many different ways. Yeah. But just one sub was playing full peak to peak X-Mech. I mean, just back full suspension travel. top comment was, "Look at all that X-Max." Man, that's not that.
Yeah, you can have a 5-inch long voice coil in a little gap and have a giant X-Max. X-Max is not a hard thing to design for.
Now, whether
it sounds good at power is a whole lot different. So.
Yep, a lot of people can confuse X-Max for X-Mech. They consider that as soon as they see an X-Max number, oh, that's how far it can move. No, that is not how far it can move, because like the new Solo X, that's just the one I had the most experience with recently. 30 millimeters X-Max one way. That's great. So 60 millimeters both ways. That's like 2.5 inches or something. The stuff's got 3 3/4 inch peak to peak excursion. That's how I'm playing it. I'm playing it peak to peak. I don't care what X-Max is because I'm so far beyond it. Now, if I was trying to make something sounded like an SQ build, then that's a little more important. But the goal would still be to make it move as little as possible.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just trying to flex stuff, then that's a different thing. So.
Yeah, I think X-Max is one of those numbers that you have to post to keep the consumer happy, even though it doesn't mean anything in the end, or it doesn't mean as much as people put the weight on it.
It is a constant spec pressure.
Yeah. What have you noticed? What changes have you seen over the last 20 years in the car audio market? What's changed the most in your opinion? And what has changed that you like the most? I suppose we do. Yeah, like what changed? You're like, man, I'm glad to see this change happening.
Wow, good question. Don't have an answer for you, dude.
It's a real good one then.
Yeah. On an engineering side, it's nice to have more tools available to do things, but man, just keeping up with market changes and the experience of the end users and stuff out there, and trying to match products to skill
just
level,
keeping up with what they want, and
that's like
that leads me to
tough job.
Have you noticed that average skill level of someone in car audio increasing? Like they're
increasing?
Yeah, like their knowledge of car audio, thanks to I guess the internet, maybe, or their perceived knowledge of
overall. So the people who are inquisitive, there's a huge amount of information available, and anybody wants to deep dive on any particular subject, you can get there fast.
Yep.
The percentage of those people is a lot lower than it used to be. So in general, the overall knowledge level is probably a lot lower than it has ever been.
And that actually does lead to one thing I've said about car audio. It has a very low barrier to entry. Anyone can get into it realistically. Whereas back in the day, to be big in a car audio and to be well known, specifically, you had to be doing something big. So you had to be really working hard.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying. Where percentage wise, it would be a lot more people willing to dig deep into it as a percentage.
And everybody here, we're fortunate in this country, and there's a lot of resources. Everybody, money's not that tough to get compared to the rest of the world. Like in the rest of the world, when someone breaks something, we've seen people like totally disassemble speakers to reuse every part on there except for what maybe broke, and to the fact where they're like peeling voice coil formers out of voice coil and gluing them onto a new former to build this thing again. It's crazy because they just don't have the resources, and it costs them money to do things. Here we're lucky, and there's so many areas for people to, but it's from gaming to social media to this, everybody's pulled in so many directions. So, and the dumbing down of society is a thing.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
Because we have so much available. I mean, so the specific knowledge, and again, what we see from talking to dealers and things, and dealers trying to find, installers that know this and that, and what the Installer Institute that just went
Saw that.
Up last month. The knowledge is a problem right now.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And you're right. Like I'll do designs for people, all over the world. And I know for a fact that when I do a design for somebody who's in, like, I do decent amount of stuff for the guys in, like, those Caribbean islands and French Polynesia and places like that. Like, I know that they're spending the money on this. Like, I know it's a chunk of money for them. I know it is.
Yeah.
So, like, obviously, I take care and try to do my best for every design I do, as if it's my own. At the degradation of sometimes I'm not as fast as I need to be, but I'd rather do it the best I can. I know for those guys, they're spending $100, whatever, however much it is. That's not just part of their weekly paycheck. That's like a chunk of money. That's a very large percentage of their income.
That's the thing for them. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. But going back to the availability of the internet, of availability of information, that's what's helped me a lot over, especially the last 2 years, is learning as much as I have about proper sound reproduction, proper, like, how we hear sound, how we perceive sound, is the availability of that information. And if I'd have come in before the internet, it wouldn't have been nearly as easy to figure out.
Yeah, there's great information out there for everybody that wants to dive. And sometimes everybody goes to social media first, and maybe you have a good experience there, maybe you don't. There's a lot of warriors out there on keyboards that are happy to put their thumb on you, but
be wrong. They'll be wrong the whole time.
If you wade through that, there's people that will help you.
Oh, absolutely. Like, there's, it's hard to go out and, I try my best to go out and to the groups and help people as much as I can. But every now and then you run into someone's like, I answer a question based on experience. They're like, oh, I read this. You're wrong. Okay, man.
Right.
Sounds good. Get your science out of my system. Nope. I'm coming into your system with a lot of science. Well, we've been at this for almost, you've been at this for almost 2 hours, 45 minutes.
We've kind of held you over here. So yeah.
Oh no, I could go all night. I love car audio. I love talking to people. I love learning as much as I can. So I could be here all night. But I do appreciate it, and we will be glad to have you back at any point. I'm sure Bobby would be over the moon to have you back on later whenever he can join us.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that, and then next time you're up in this area, come by. And
my plan is to be there sometime in March. My plan currently is to attend Mark Eldridge's. He's having an SQ event at his shop, and then a judge's training for IASCA. So I have JL training that I'm going back for the weekend before that, and then Mark's thing the next weekend. So I'd have to drive to that. So I'm hoping to make it. But if I do that, then I'll be there probably March 11th, 12th, somewhere in there.
I haven't seen Mark in a minute, but he's a good guy.
Yep, I've learned quite a bit from Mark over the last year and a half. Going to his class a couple times now. Oh, he's coming by. Well, there's your answer. There's your answer.
Committed.
That's right. Well, sir, I appreciate you taking your time to join us and to educate us and spread all of this information that you have. And as Kevin Smoot said earlier, we appreciate all the work you've done throughout the years and providing us with these great products and everything you continue to do.
Well, thanks, and appreciate everybody that hung on to listen.
Thanks, sir. Well, all right, everybody. Y'all have a good one. As Bobby would say, fix your engine noise and be nice to people.